Today on Madden 25, I'll be going over 10 players who you need to trade for in your franchise modes, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. I already have a part 1 to this where I went over 10 players on offense who you should trade for, and if you want to watch that video, there is a card at the top right of your screen for you to go ahead and check out. The players I ended up choosing today are based on the fact that they're all pretty easy to trade for, considering how good they are, and they all progress well into the future. And I know this is a fact because I did 2 separate 5-year simulations. That way I have easy data points, and all of my claims are backed up by science. These are the XP sliders that I've used for the 2 simulations. I used these in my franchise last year, and I'm probably going to do so again this year. I feel like these are more realistic than the actual progression and regression system in Madden, because I feel like oftentimes it's hard for young players to get better, and the old players stay really good into their 30s. I feel like this is a lot more realistic, demonstrating how quickly young players can improve and how quickly older players can regress. We're going to randomize the team. That way, I'm going to have one set team where I make all the trades for. I'm not trying to trade any valuable draft picks or good players. And ultimately, it lands on the New York Jets. So they will be our guinea pig today. Keep in mind, the trades we make in this video are not necessarily meant to be realistic. If you want a realistic franchise, the Broncos series I'm running is for you, because that series is in the name of realism. Josh Hines-Allen from the Jaguars is not one of the 10 players who I'm trading for today, but I do want to go over him real quick. The players I picked in today's video are not supposed to be superstars. They're not supposed to cost an arm and a leg, whereas Josh Hines-Allen does. But I do have to point out, if you are willing to trade a king's ransom for a defensive player, Josh Allen is probably your best bet. You'd have to give up something like a first, a second, multiple thirds, and maybe a good young player like Will McDonald, but I found that Josh Allen develops into a monster in this game, and if this is something that you want to do, it might end up being worth it. In the first simulation I did, he's a 95 overall, and he's not really regressing too much yet, despite the fact that he's already 32 years old. Let's take a look at his stats, though. Not too bad. 22 sacks, 20 sacks, and 20 sacks. Led the league in sacks 3 times, best defensive lineman 3 times, defensive player of the year twice. In the second simulation, he is a 93 overall, so again, still quite good. He had seasons with, get ready, 20 sacks, 25 sacks, which is the all-time record, and then 22 the following season. 1-time defensive player of the year, 2-time best defensive lineman. So let's go through the actual 10 players now, the first of which is Rashan from the Green Bay Packers. This is pretty easily the best player we're going to go over today, not including Josh Hines-Allen, because Gary has superstar development. He's an 85 overall, and I wanted to avoid really good players, but I found that Gary was pretty easy to trade for, all things considered. I'm definitely not trading Garrett Wilson for him, but I think I can make it work with some draft picks. What about 2 second-round picks and a backup offensive tackle? This is all it's going to take for Rashan Gary, and while I wanted to avoid trading first or second-round picks in this video, it's obviously worth it for a guy like Rashan Gary. We're not going to trade any more first or second-rounders today, but I just want to show you how easy it is to get a premier pass rusher such as Rashan Gary. In the first simulation, as you can see, he's an 89 overall, and his numbers across the board are pretty solid. 4 consecutive seasons of double-digit sacks, 5 consecutive seasons with double-digit tackles for loss. In the second simulation, he's an 88, so pretty much just as good as he was the first time around. He's the 7th ranked player at his position, so regression really has not hit him too hard. He has 4 seasons with at least 9.5 sacks and 5 seasons with double-digit TFLs. He is quite good. If you're looking for more of a gem on your defensive line, Mekhi Wingo with the Lions is a guy who develops really well. He only has normal development, but he's already a 71 overall, and he's only 21 years old. Being that he's so young, he's going to have plenty of room to grow. And because of that, the Lions want quite a bit for him. But I think we can get him for pretty cheap. Ashton Davis, who's a backup safety, along with a 5th rounder and a 6th rounder. And as you can see, he develops really well. In this first simulation, he's an 86 overall, and he's only 26 years old. He still has room to grow a little bit more. The sack production isn't all that great, but he's a good run defender, and if you were to play him at edge rusher, I'm sure his sack numbers would be higher because he had 93 finesse moves in that sim. The second time around, he didn't end up as good, but still 83 overall, not bad at all. And his sack numbers actually ended up a little bit better here, although his tackle for loss numbers are a little bit worse. So I think depending on where you play him, you can get more sack production. Drew Sanders is the next guy we're going to talk about. 22 years old, star development. Keep in mind he has an Achilles injury, so you're going to have to turn pre-existing injuries off or trade for him in a future season. But if he's only going to cost Tony Adams, I think this is well worth it. In the 2 simulations I did, he's developed into an okay player. First time around, 77 overall, nothing spectacular, largely because he's had some trouble seeing the field, having missed the first year with injury, and he really was never a consistent starter. I think if you utilize him as a starter, he should end up being a pretty good player for you, especially considering he's big, he's fast, and he's a good user for people who like to control their linebackers. In the second sim, he's a 76 overall, but again, he only started a few seasons. The glitch with Sanders, though, is to move him to outside linebacker and have him play as an edge rusher. This is where he can be really good. I put him in the Steelers playbook for 5 seasons, and he had some solid sack production. The first 2 seasons, he started off slow, so I switched him from left outside linebacker to right outside linebacker, and that ended up being the key. Had I put him at right outside linebacker the entire time, I think he would have progressed a little bit quicker. But nonetheless, he's an underrated linebacker who you can convert to a pass rusher. When I was going through the rosters, I was really surprised to see Christian Harris is only a 75 overall, because I feel like he should be a lot higher than that. He had a pretty good season last year with the Houston Texans, but he does develop well in this game, considering he only has normal development. He's pretty easy to trade for, though. All it would cost is likely some package of mid-rounders. We could do Morgan Moses, who is an older starter, but I think we can get him for less. 2 4th-rounders and 2 backups is all it's going to take to get another guy who can be your user at linebacker, considering how fast he is and how good he is in coverage. In the first sim, he developed into a great player. 88 overall, he's the 6th ranked right outside linebacker in the game, and then he has pretty solid production. Keep in mind, he's an off-ball coverage linebacker, so he's not going to be putting up big sack or tackle for loss totals. In the second sim, he's an 85 overall, so a little bit worse, but still quite solid. He's actually the 4th player at his position here, so even though he developed a little bit worse, it looks like everybody else at the position did as well. As you can see here, pretty good numbers across the board. If you like speed at the linebacker position, then I think Payton Wilson on the Steelers might be for you. Now, keep in mind he is 24 years old, so it's going to be a little bit harder for him to develop compared to some of the other younger players we go over today. He's also made of glass with a 74 injury rating, but he's really fast and he's got some intriguing ratings. And for people who like fast user linebackers, Payton Wilson is your guy. All we would have to trade is Xavier Gipson, a solid young receiver with the same age, rating, and development trait, but I think I would rather Payton Wilson because I feel like he has more upside given some of the athletic ratings he holds. So he doesn't develop all that well, usually into the high 70s, maybe the low 80s if you're lucky, and if you do utilize him as a starter right away, he should make it into the 80s, because the Steelers consistently have only used him as a starter for a couple seasons, but nonetheless, he should develop better than this if you utilize him, and he's going to be a fun player for your defense if you like speed. Let's move over to the secondary now, and we'll start with Martin Emerson on the Browns, 80 overall corner, but he's only 23 years old. He's still got a lot of room to grow with star development, and he's really easy to get. Solomon Thomas, 2 3rd-rounders and a 6th. One of the more expensive players we're going to get today, but it's absolutely worth it for a guy in Emerson who has the upside to be a CB1 on your roster. In the first simulation, he's an 84 overall. He really didn't develop all that well in this one, and I think he's starting to regress a little bit. Also, keep in mind, he doesn't have elite ball skills, so if that's something you prioritize, then some of the other defensive backs that we go over today might be more of your cup of tea. In the second simulation, he develops a little bit better. He's an 86 overall, and as you can see, the coverage ratings across the board look pretty solid. 93 zone coverage, and pretty solid interception production across the board. The next guy we're going to talk about is a rookie, and it's mainly because his team is so deep at the cornerback position. Of course, the Eagles drafted both Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, but the tiebreaker for me is that, for one thing, Cooper DeJean is 2 years younger, but some of his athletic ratings and his catching rating are both quite a bit higher than that of Quinyon Mitchell. So if you want somebody who's a playmaker and also has more room to grow, then I think Cooper DeJean is the guy you should go after. And from what I've seen, I think he's a little bit easier to get than Quinyon Mitchell as well. Now, we are going to have to give up quite a bit here. Will McDonald is a good young asset, and I don't think the Jets would do this in real life, but I don't know what Will McDonald's ceiling is in the game. It can't be that high, considering he's already 25 years old. He's only a 72 overall. We also had to give up another starter with Chuck Clark and a third rounder, but it is so worth it for Cooper DeJean because he develops so well in this game. As you can see, there's a noticeable difference between him and Quinion Mitchell. DeJean is quite a bit better throughout Madden simulation. He is the 10th ranked corner here in this first sim. High ball production with 6 interceptions in the third season and good coverage ratings. Second time around, he's also a 90 overall, and he's also quite a bit better than Quinion Mitchell. Here he is the 6th ranked cornerback in the league, so even though you do have to give up quite a bit to trade for him, it is very, very worth it because he is a monster in this game. The next guy we're going to talk about usually shows up on the trade block, and that's Markquese Bell with the Cowboys, a 25-year-old safety who's an 81 overall. And I think given his skill set, he's a guy who you can move over to linebacker because he's big, he's fast, he can cover, he can stop the run, and he's pretty easy to trade for. We only have to give up a bundle of day 3 picks, none of which are earlier than the 5th round, but I think we can get even better value here. Morgan Moses is a good starter, but he is 33 years old. And keep in mind, the Jets have Olu Fashanu who can start at right tackle. So not only are we going to get Bell, but we're also going to land a 4th rounder as well that we may use later today. Bell doesn't develop all that well. It seems like he regresses pretty quickly. I think that's the case with a lot of the safeties, but he probably peaked around an 85 overall in both of these simulations. And if you do move him to linebacker, his progression and regression might be quite a bit different. But I think given the price of admission, it is absolutely worth it to trade for a guy like Markquese Bell because he is quite good. Another safety who I found on the trade block who really shouldn't be is Kirby Joseph with Detroit. Obviously, the Lions are going to figure out a way to have him, Brian Branch, and Ifeatu Melifonwu on the field. But in Madden, Detroit has other plans. Again, if you like ball production, Kirby Joseph is your guy. High catching rating and high hit power. He as well costs pretty much nothing. 2 5s and 2 7s. That is a bargain for a 23-year-old star development safety. Now again, he didn't progress all that well, and I think that's more so because regression is starting to hit him like a truck. I would guess he peaked around the mid-80s, and depending on where you play him, maybe move him to corner, his ratings probably wouldn't drop so quickly. Here in the second simulation, he fared a little bit better, currently sitting as an 81 overall. And I think part of the reason why he did fail to progress both times is that he wasn't always the consistent starter, sitting behind Brian Branch or having been traded away sometimes. Here he was dealt to New Orleans, where he was only a rotational player. The last guy we're going to talk about is Calen Bullock, the safety for the Texans, who's currently sitting behind Jalen Petrie. 21 years old, hit in development, pretty good ratings across the board. A lot of the rookie safeties develop pretty well, such as Tyquise Smith, Tyler Nubin, Javon Bullard, Cole Bishop. But I have found that Bullock is probably the easiest to get of that group, and is also the youngest of the group. All you have to do is trade Javon Kinlaw, and you're getting a quality starting safety for probably 6 or 7 years. Here in this first sim, he is the 8th ranked free safety in the game. And keep in mind, he's 26. He's got room to get better. And that's with kind of being a backup early in his career. It really seems like he came onto the scene in his second season with 4 interceptions. Here in the second simulation, he is an 82 overall, once again, the 8th ranked free safety in the game. So he is consistently a top 10 player at his position. And again, given that he's only 26 years old, he should stay at the top for a couple of seasons before I would guess he regresses pretty quickly, such as Bell and Kirby Joseph. So that'll wrap up the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope this was helpful for you trying to figure out some defensive players to trade for. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Peace out.